Want to boldly explore the universe? Try out Brilliant today. Brilliant's interactive examples and active problem solving help you develop your intuition in mathematics, science, and computer science, that you may live long and prosper. Visit brilliant.org/ACL for 20% off the annual premium subscription.
Manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy. Thank you, happy.
Hello and welcome to A Captain's Log. Wherever you are in the universe, we are your weekly source for everything related to 55 years and counting of Star Trek, whether it be series, movies, books, and much more. Our Trek wouldn't be complete without you, the fans, and most importantly, we couldn't do this show without the greatest co-host, Lily Fox Love.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. And don't forget about covering everything Star Trek, including collector glasses. Rogg will probably want to drink cocoa out of those and collect them for sure. So joining us via subspace all the way from planet XO3 is our co-host, Rogg, who made it to us on a Priority Comm channel and on time this week.
I had an autograph session back on XO3 last weekend at TrekkieCon, right after the best of the best interviews you had with J.G. Hertzler. But I traveled at warp speed to get here today.
Klingon pu bach nes martoch.
Yes! Yeah!
Great job, Rogg. Yeah, I see you've downloaded this Mark Okran book into your little tin head.
Speaking of being joined by the greatest host, Lily is the greatest. I agree, Ambassador. She can also be introduced as co-host Klingon speaker extraordinaire, Lily Fox Lim.
Oh, you two, enough. Thank you. You know, I'm here hosting out of our love for Star Trek and bettering this world towards a utopian planet that will shrug off the habit of war. Star Trek's philosophy and our focus towards that is people supporting people and using their talents for a stronger, balanced society, which includes exploration beyond little old us. Star Trek exploration is not just those things. It's also infinite diversity for us all. And we're getting there. Thanks in large part to Gene Roddenberry's vision for Star Trek, passing the torch to Rick Berman, Heather Caden, and Alex Kurtzman.
Well, we're very proud to have you, and it's bold and beautiful statements like that, which are why Rogg and I are especially thrilled to have you with us every week, Lily, and you, the fans, because we have so much to talk about with Star Trek.
Yes, that's right. Oh, but first, a quick reminder to follow us on Instagram at A Captain's Log Show with underscores, and feel free to share the page with all of your Trekkie friends.
Last week, A Captain's Log was picked up by a station on XO3. I hope the antenna doesn't freeze.
Oh, when did this happen?
Hey, that's wonderful news, Rogg, and we know that you're a great ambassador between Star Trek and your home planet.
Oh, goodness.
And speaking of Lower Decks news, we have more of that to talk about this week, don't we, Brian?
Yes, we sure do, Lily. The second season of the animated series Star Trek Lower Decks is well underway, and episode 4 features a white-furred Mugatu.
We work for the Mugatos. This place has to be a horned heaven.
Mugatu, seen in the original Star Trek series episode, this time from the California-class USS Cerritos. It's dispatched to a planet to investigate an unexplained sighting of a dangerous Mugatu.
I haven't seen that one yet, but I liked episode 3 featuring a very special Trekkie treat, the long-awaited return of Lieutenant Tom Paris. The episode titled, "We'll Always Have Tom Paris," paying homage to the Next Gen episode We'll Always Have Paris in title only, features Robert Duncan McNeil returning after 20 years, now in cartoon form, to the role he made famous on Star Trek Voyager from 1995 to 2001 on UPN.
And the cartoon version of the character is now depicted on a new collector's plate. I saw that Star Trek Unlimited made these plates for an Andrew Jackson bill, and an Alexander Hamilton bill will get you an 8-inch in diameter Tom Paris Voyager plate with a stand. Go to StarTrekUniverse.com to get yours.
I like to collect glasses, but Voyager never had them. A collector's plate sounds nice.
But don't worry, Rog. We can change the subject now and start talking about our special interview guest this week.
Yes, that's right, Lily. We have another great guest this week. He's written an amazing 30 Star Trek-related novels.
Wow.
He also co-wrote the Star Trek Voyager's Season 2 episode, Resistance. Now, apart from Star Trek, he's written novels for other TV and film series, including some promos for Nickelodeon, including Star Wars, Batman, The Fantastic Four, Predator, and he's written more than 150 books that are comics, of course, and 80 novels outside of Star Trek. Michael Jan Friedman, welcome to A Captain's Log.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, Michael, first question's real simple. I do recall hearing a story that you didn't have a lot of writers that were around you, except one that was in your neighborhood when you were a really young kid growing up. But you knocked on the door to someone who published something that you had read, and he was surprised to see you. Is that what got you into writing as inspiration at a very young age? And I'm hoping you can kind of tell us your beginnings and that little story you can sneak in for us. I'd like the fans to be able to hear it.
Well, I grew up in Queens, New York, and, my neighbors worked in the garment district, or they sold carpet, or they did other things. Nobody wrote. I mean, I'm not even sure how many people anywhere were writers, and I'm sure almost no one was a full-time writer. It's true. There was probably about a mile from my house, there was a science fiction digest book, one of the better known books, the kind you would see on the newsstand. And I noticed, as I was going through it, that the address where it was published was within walking distance. So I walked to that place, and I had a story in hand, and I knocked on the door. And how old was I? I don't know. I guess it was about 14, 15, something like that. And I had this story, and I knocked on the guy's door, and he opened it, and he was in his robe, and I said, hi, I'm an aspiring writer, and here's my science fiction story. And he looked at me like, kid, what are you, crazy? And you just come to my door and you hand me your story? But I guess he thought I was enterprising, so he took it and he read it, and he actually got back to me on it. He didn't accept it, but he did write a few comments on it, which I was grateful for. But he was one guy in my neighborhood. There was another guy in my neighborhood who I didn't even know about, and that was Julie Schwartz, who was also probably less than a mile from where I grew up. Julie Schwartz was the editor who ushered in the Silver Age of comics. He was the guy at DC Comics who brought Superman back to life and introduced the Silver Age Flash and Green Lantern. When I met him, he was an editor emeritus at DC. And I said, Julie, do you know how lucky you are? And he said, yeah, I mean, I did things that I loved all my life. I was an editor at DC Comics. I said, Julie, that's not what I'm talking about. I said, if I knew when I was growing up that you lived in Cambridge Hall, I would have been at your door every day. Mr. Schwartz, it's me.
But you still had the opportunity to speak with him one-on-one at this convention. What an amazing story, how it comes full circle where he's also in your neighborhood.
So when did you become a Star Trek fan? And tell us about the early days of writing a Star Trek novel, how your first opportunity there came about.
I was sitting there in my pajamas watching this thing and going, this is, if I were going to put a show on television, this is exactly what I would put on. This show was made for me. And so I watched it, and it was great. And then I watched it pretty much every week for the next 3 years. Every time it was on, I watched it, and so I got into Star Trek as early as one could possibly have gotten in. As far as my first Star Trek book was Double Double. So my editor hooked me up with this Star Trek publishing program at Pocketbooks, and I said, "This is great! Imagine putting words in the mouths of Kirk and Spock. This is terrific." Yeah. Because at that time it was only original series. Mm-hmm. The Next Generation hadn't debuted yet, and I put together an outline for the editor, a guy named Dave Stern, who I still speak to, great guy, and I put together this outline, and he said, "Mike," he goes, "this is exactly what we're not looking for."
Wow.
You've got Scotty in these mythological settings. He goes, "This is not what we want science fiction." I said, "Yeah, but you liked my mythological stories. That's why we're having this conversation." And he said, "Yeah, I liked your writing. I thought your writing would translate well to Star Trek." So I said, "Oh, okay." And I went back to the drawing board, and I came back with another story. And he said, "Mike," he goes, "this is great. This is great, except it has no ending. Where's the ending?" And I said, "Well, I didn't want to spoil it for you." And he said, "Oh, it's okay, Mike. I'm a professional. You can spoil the ending for me." So I wrote an ending for it, and he said, "This is great. I love this. It's a story. It was a story that sprang from What Are Little Girls Made Of?, the original series episode. It picked up where the episode left off, and it eventually got the Romulans involved, and there was an android duplicate of Kirk taking his place, and it was a lot of fun, and I loved it, and all that pent up energy from having been a Star Trek fan all that time went into that first book, and as I said, it was called Double Double, and it was very well received. And based on that, they said, "So, would you like to do another book?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do another book." And that wound up being a Next Generation book, because by then the Next Generation had come out.
So going back to that first draft in your first book, can you tell us, were there drastic changes in the theme of the story, or is it more of a character-based rewrite back to the publisher for approval? And how did it change? I'm assuming it didn't have Rook, Andrea, Corby, as they were already passed, but how did you approach this?
Yeah, they weren't in it. The only surviving character from that episode, who wasn't Kirk or Spock or McCoy, was the Kirk android, or not even the Kirk android, a Kirk android, who had been created unbeknownst to our heroes, and who got himself off that planet and eventually took Kirk's place. So no, I didn't have Corby in it, or Andrea, or Rogg.
I see. So the timeline puts What Are Little Girls Made Of in the first season.
Yeah, you got a fax back, and the fax said, "Well, look at your star date."
Oh, right.
And there was a memo on the wall at the offices at Pocket from Gene Roddenberry saying, "Star dates, we made them up as we were going along. Pay no attention to them. Don't worry about them." And yet here we had to worry about the star date. So we sent back a fax saying, "Okay, so let's get this straight. We can change 10 or 12 pages of dialogue, or we can change the star date." And the answer came back, "Well, yeah." So we changed one character in the star date, one numeral, and that kept Chekhov in the book.
That's awesome.
And it was type of thing that went on in those days.
Even though Chekhov wasn't on the Enterprise till season 2, but your book, Double Double, certainly could be off enough into the future to have Chekhov. I'm glad you fought to validate keeping poor Chekhov in there, as he always gets ousted in a pitch, in this case, or in the Star Trek animated series.
Poor Chekhov.
Poor Chekhov.
A Captain's Log returns in a moment.
Michael Jan Friedman is with us here on A Captain's Log. Mike is the author of 80 books, 30 Star Trek books, and writer of the first Star Trek The Next Generation hardback book, which was a New York Times best-selling book. His website is michaeljanfriedman.net. Also, crazy8press.com is a website where you can go for challenging science fiction books like the 21st Century Aztec Stories and many others. One of my favorite Star Trek Voyager episodes is your episode from season 2 titled Resistance. That's the element of soft, not in your face life or death, but imminent Star Trek classic style is within this episode. The Voyager ship needs some tellurium for the antimatter reactors, so Harry Kim, he puts his life support on the Voyager at minimal levels while the away team is stranded looking for some. Neelix ends up making it back with some of this tellurium for Voyager to continue, but at the cost of Janeway, Tuvok, and B'Elanna being stranded. 2 of them are even imprisoned. Tell us how you pitched this story of yours to Voyager producers, and was this initially intended to be a Voyager episode or one of your books that you would write with Kevin Ryan?
It usually worked the other way around. You know, Kevin and I would pitch we started pitching to the Next Generation. We pitched a few times to them and invariably got what Kevin called nibbles, no bites. So, you know, they would tell us, oh, it's a great idea. It's in production. That's a great idea. Where it's in development. That's a great idea. But you can't do it because it conflicts with something that's in production that we can't tell you about. But for the most part, they were encouraging. They said, yeah, you're right on the money. You're 5 out of 6 times. You're hitting the right notes. Keep doing it. And so we pitched to Next Gen a few times. We pitched to Ron Moore at Deep Space Nine once. And then we pitched to Jeri Taylor at Voyager. And the pitch was Janeway plays Dulcinea to a Kazon Don Quixote. So the Kazon were the villains of the series initially. And so we picked the Kazon, and Jeri liked it. You know, it's high concept, and it was something they hadn't quite done before. She said, let me take this to the writing staff and see if they like it as much as I do, and I'll get back to you tomorrow morning. So we were like, she liked it. She liked it. Is it possible that this will be the time? And she calls us the next morning, and she said, gentlemen, we're gonna buy your story. Yes. And we were, they're gonna buy it. She goes, but I have to tell you, this in the afternoon yesterday, after we spoke, someone came and pitched substantially the same thing.
Really?
And had you pitched this morning instead of yesterday morning, we would have had to accept the other pitch instead. Oh. That's how crazy it was. Wow. They were hearing something like 1,000 pitches, 1,000 story ideas a year from outsiders, never mind from the writing staff. Mm-hmm. And there were only 2 or 3 episodes a year that they allowed written by outsiders, which is 2 or 3 more than other shows.
Okay, so I'm 14. It's 1991. My first 2 Star Trek books are Metamorphosis, a Next Generation story by Gene Lora. It picks up where the fabulous episode The Measure of a Man left off. That's an episode I'm still trying to get my busy friend Lily to watch. And also the first book is A Reunion, your New York Times best-selling hardcover debut. It's a book about Captain Picard's past and present when he meets and gets reunited with the crew of his ship before his captaincy on the Enterprise. It was the USS Stargazer. So Michael, you were very influential in my very early days of whetting my appetite for Star Trek with this book. Now, please tell us about this book, its origins, and even Gates McFadden narrating an audiobook.
Well, I want to write a story about Picard's original crew. We got a little bit of information about the Stargazer crew in the battle, but I'd like to flesh them out, and I'd like to make it a murder mystery. And they said, yeah, go ahead, give it a shot. One of the most delightful things you can offer a Star Trek writer is the opportunity to put together a new crew, right? That was
Absolutely
great. I mean, we sometimes, we sit there and put together new crews, that'll never see the light of day just because it's fun to put together new crews. So this was a wonderful opportunity. The only one whose name had already been established was Vigo, but I made him an alien. It meshed with Wesley and Dr. Crusher because of the Jack Crusher connection. So there was a lot to work with there. As far as how Gates came to read it, voiceover work that was done in the audiobooks was by men. There were no solo works by female voice artists, and so I pushed for that to happen. And one of the projects that came out of that was this one whereby Gates read on her own, read all the parts in Reunion and did a magnificent job. She was great.
Of course.
And the other project that came out of that was Faces of Fire, where B.B. Betts, Kirk's love interest, because she was a prominent character in the book, she played David's mother in the movies. So between her and Gates, we managed to get some great female voices.
Open the gates!
A Captain's Log returns in a moment.
Welcome back to A Captain's Log. Michael Jan Friedman is with us here on A Captain's Log this week. Now, Mike is the author of 80 books. 30 of those are Star Trek books, with the first being the Star Trek The Next Generation hardback book, which was a New York Times best-selling book.
You can visit his website, michaeljanfriedman.net, and also crazy8press.com for more challenging science fiction books like the 21st Century Aztec stories and others.
You got it.
You've written more than 80 books now. How long does it typically take you to write a book, say, for Star Trek?
About 70 days between, pitching it, writing the outline, pitching it, not 70 days from start to finish, but 70 working days to write a book. Almost to the day. Obviously some books are a little longer than others, a little more complex than others, but about that's a good rule of thumb, 70 days. All Good Things was a book I did in 14 days, but I had a 2-hour script to work with. So that just putting that script into prose form was good for probably 100, 120 pages.
You talked about Shadows on the Sun, the excellent McCoy story. Bryan owns that hardback as one of his first Star Trek books. Which of your Star Trek books are your favorites, and which books have received the best reception from fans?
I would say the Reunion, the Next Generation, first Next Generation hardcover, because it went into Picard's past, because it was a mystery story, which people always love. And so I would say that might be people's favorite of the books I've done. People also like Crossover, which unites Spock, Scotty, and McCoy in the context of the Next Generation. And some people like Death in Winter, which is very interesting, because Death in Winter, I got hate mail for Death in Winter because there was a hint that Beverly Crusher would die.
Now, what are your plans for the future of Star Trek books? Future series like Strange New Worlds is making it a possibility being set in the past from Captain Pike's and Spock's early days.
Yeah.
I would love to, but it's not all up to me. The series that they're doing now are not encouraging scripts from outside writers, as the other series did. That might change, but for now they're not doing that. So I would say the chances are very slim that I'll be contributing to the TV series. As far as books, we'll see.
Michael Jan Friedman, thank you so much for being with us here on A Captain's Log. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
Yes, thank you so much for spending your time talking about your writing with us, Michael. This was so much fun. And we'll see you all next time on A Captain's Log.
Hello, happy, my old friend. I'm glad you've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy. Ooh.